Welcome to the Bioptimizers Awesome Health Podcast. And now here's your host, Wade T. Lightheart.
What if you could double your energy naturally without caffeine or stimulants in just 3 short months? It's not only possible, you can transform every aspect of your health if you follow the 12-week blueprint we've created for you in the Awesome Health System. The Awesome Health System is a free course where you receive a daily video lesson spanning the most cutting-edge secrets for air, water, exercise, sunshine, optimizers, mindset, and education. It's something most companies would charge hundreds of dollars for, yet you get it for free when you go to bioptimizers.com. To access your course, register to download the PDF report called 3 Phases of Bioptimization, which gets you access to the report and daily access to the first lesson in the 12-week, 84-day Awesome Health course.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. It's Wade T. Lightheart from Bioptimizers with another edition of the Awesome Health Podcast. And today we are going to talk about light, why it's important, how it's important, and why I would say that most of us aren't getting enough of this essential nutrient which powers our entire solar system. That's how powerful it is. And so many people, it's kind of like the elusive obvious. And today we have an expert joining us today. His name is Matt Maruca, and he is the founder and CEO of Raw Optics, which teach people about the important roles that light plays in health and develops the most advanced light therapy-based products for transforming health. He began his quest to heal after struggling with various health challenges as a kid, ultimately coming to learn about tremendous impact of light in human health. The findings that we are beings of light ultimately led him on a spiritual journey to realize the unlimited nature of our human experience. He spends his time building his company, teaching about his findings, working with top-level thought leaders, celebrities, and executives of all kinds, and traveling the world. He founded Raw Optics at the age of 18 and built it into a multi-million-dollar brand on his own. Matt's currently 22 years old, which is pretty remarkable. Matt, welcome to the show.
Thanks. It's pretty cool to listen to that. Sometimes I think, wow, I did that. That's pretty cool.
Well, you know, what's interesting, what I find fast, I'm going to talk about a topic before we get into light, just on that alone. And I've noticed that there are 2 types of individuals in 2 main categories, I would suggest, that's happening, particularly with our younger generation. And I'm very interested in this because the future is, frankly, on your shoulders. And it's a future where, in many cases, the shifting social influences of the species, for example, the advent of rapid technological innovation has made navigating the world a little bit more complicated in some ways and a whole lot easier in other ways. And yet there seems to be not a lot of awareness of some of the big philosophical issues in regards to governance and location and identity and security and privacy, which have been pretty much eradicated by these technologies. Yet many of those components can provide someone such as yourself to be able to accelerate to the highest levels. And it seems like we're falling into 2 camps. Those who feel that they are a victim, which I would say is in the majority, and are, you know, becoming very soft, snowflakey, you know, I can't. And I think maybe for good reason, you know, cost of housing, the way the life is, some of the decision-making process, which are people multi-generations older who aren't really integrated with technology and what's really happening or the consequences or benefits of it. And then there's guys such as yourself, guys and girls such as yourself, who have just adapted and integrated this technology and have carved out an extraordinary life for themselves, which are contributing to the health and well-being. How did you get to this place, being in Costa Rica and living this kind of, you know, lifestyle? I think that in itself is fascinating as much as your tech.
I appreciate you asking, Wade. It's sometimes I'm amazed, and in particular, I actually realize that I take the situation I'm in totally for granted a lot of the time, and I'm grateful, but at the same time, sometimes it's just normal for me. I go where I want. If I want to get on a plane tomorrow and go to Germany, I'll go to Germany. Like, it's pretty cool. And it's because I can, I feel like it's normal, and I wouldn't probably accept something less. I mean, if I had no choice, sure, I'd surrender. But once I became familiar with this lifestyle, I thought, why would anyone do anything different? But I ended up here really because I just surrendered to the flow of events that were taking place and just kind of put my best foot forward as much as I could at each step of the way. And it brought me to a pretty cool place. And so what that looked like in my case was growing up and being a curious kid, coming across some really interesting science around the paleo diet when I was about 14, because I was trying to heal a bunch of acne breakouts I was getting. But then all the other health issues I had as a kid that I mentioned loosely in the bio, those were gut issues, allergies, headaches, and they really were persistent and really bothersome. And when I started reading this idea of epigenetics in relation to the paleo diet and how we could use diet theoretically to modify our epigenetic expression, and meaning for those who aren't familiar, the turning off and on of certain genes just based on environmental factors, I thought that's pretty cool. And what the author was writing, it was actually a blog from Mark Sisson. I thought, he implied that you could even heal a lot of other diseases, and things and all kinds of conditions. And I thought, oh my gosh, like, this is what I was looking for. Like, this is amazing. Now he posited that it was all about diet, like 80% food, which I later on came to learn is not the case. Based on my experience and the research I've studied, it has a lot more to do with, for example, our environment, our light exposure, our beliefs, our mindset, whether we're in chronic fight or flight and stress or chronic balance. But all that just led me to a deep quest in health and light and energy. And then at the same time, I had a friend who just threw me a couple books about entrepreneurship: The 4-Hour Work Week by Tim Ferriss, The Lean Startup by Eric Ries, The Hard Thing About Hard Things by Ben Horowitz, and then The Lean Startup by Peter Thiel. And I think there was maybe one more in there, but those were pretty impactful. Those were very impactful. And they just got me thinking, like, wow, I could actually create something, do something, and in the world that matters. And the Tim Ferriss book, of course, was like, well, I could also do it anywhere I want and do whatever I want. Now, I caution people when they read The 4-Hour Work Week, because I think it becomes really appealing to think that the goal, the aim is to just chill and drink margaritas all day long and do nothing and have a bunch of virtual assistants running a business for you. And I actually, for a few years, thought that was the goal, instead of like actually having an impact and doing something important. So whenever I was actually like on purpose working on my business, I would feel torn and conflicted, because I felt like, why am I doing this? I should have an operations manager, blah, 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 someone doing this. But I, that kind of faded away through some challenging situations that forced me to realize that wasn't my path, to just sit back and be passive. But it was just one thing leading to the next. And when I learned about light, I learned that circadian rhythms are super important. Chronobiology, the body's clock, has a huge impact on basically every single function and cell in the body. And that morning sunlight is really important to set that rhythm. And this is like super basic, circadian rhythm 101 science, but it's still super uncommonly known. It's not common. Most people don't know it. And then on the other hand, to morning sunlight, we need to have darkness at night. Of course, you know this, and Paul Chek, who connected us, knows this, and many other people in the health and wellness world know this, but many people still don't, even in biohacking and health and wellness. So naturally, the solution for the modern world is blue light blocking glasses, blue light protection eyewear. There are many names, but it's the same concept. It's sleep lenses, we call ours. And so you wear them when the sun sets, as you know, you put them on, they block blue light and they tell the brain, hey, it's time to go to sleep. And we have people now who, used to take 4 hours to fall asleep. They fall asleep in 30 minutes. People who used to fall asleep in an hour, they fall asleep in minutes or seconds after their head hits the pillow, they say in their amazing reviews. So we have people who would wake up all throughout the night and they sleep through the whole night. We have people whose autoimmune diseases are healing faster because their body's making more melatonin naturally. Their cells are healing themselves. So really, I feel like I'm here as a result of just engaging step by step with this process. And I'm blessed, like, for the amount of hard work and dedication I've put in. There's some really great quote I've heard, like, you are paid directly into proportion to the difficulty of problems that you solve. So I've been sort of doing my best to solve relatively difficult problems and have a pretty big impact in people's lives. And for how much our product does, we probably don't even charge enough for it. It's really like a medical device, but it's under $150, and you just put it on your face and that's it. It works really well. But yeah, that's how I ended up here. And now there's a huge mission before me. It's really to create the greatest lighting company the world has ever seen, and one of the greatest companies the world has ever seen, actually. But that's all what I think the last few years have been preparing me for. So that's how I'm here.
It's a beautiful vision for your life, and you pointed out a couple of things, and I think I'm going to add to that and dive a little deeper in some of the mechanics of what your company does and stuff. But first and foremost, congratulations on the discovery of a purpose-driven life. And I think so many people are caught up into the economics, and when I say economics, there is the one aspect of life that you can't get back is the time. That is a depleting reserve, as your experience in physical reality. We're all headed towards an end at some point, and it comes sooner than we think. The second component is most people are caught trying to make enough money to first relieve the anxiety of just living. And then there may be an aspirational component. And then you kind of identified that third point as like, well, I can get everything kind of hung out and taken care of by other people. That kind of Tim Ferriss vision that he outlined in the book, which Tim doesn't live like that, which is ironic. He comments about it a lot. He's a very hard worker. But when you get past that, and let's say you achieve all those goals, which you've done at a very early age, and you think, oh, well, it's going to be margaritas on the beach and partying. Well, that gets really tired after a few weeks, let alone a few months. And then you're left there's two kind of places that people fall into. They either kind of go into this kind of debauchery type lifestyle of the more thing, or they amplify and find their true purpose. And I can relate to that because I went through a similar situation. I wasn't quite your age. It was a little later in life, but I can relate. And I got on the mission of, taking people from sick to superhuman. It was my passion and what I love to do. And it's what you're doing on a late Saturday night or talking about. I'd say that's a good thing to be on. The second thing I'll cover when it comes to light, and I'd like to get your insight on this. One of the most inspirational books I've ever read was The Holy Science by a fellow by the name of Swami Sri Yukteswar. And this book he was the teacher or the guru for a guy by the name of Paramahansa Yogananda, who was a figure that really brought Eastern philosophy to the West. He had a big influence on Paul Chek, had a massive...
I've read The Holy Science as well.
Yeah. And if you look in that book, he illustrates that the centers of the universe were these super concentrated stars, essentially, that were disseminating consciousness itself. So Yukteswar saw light as pure consciousness being transferred as a living life force into reality that we see. Also as a reflective energy that created what we perceive as the natural world. It's very sophisticated and very concise book. And I go back to it frequently because as I progress in my own spiritual journey, I start to get nuances of it. How do you classify what light is. What is light to you?
Thanks so much for asking. Now, this is awesome. I just have to say already, because these are the kinds of questions that a lot of people don't ask. So I'll say, first of all, I really appreciate you bringing this stuff up, because the autobiography of a yogi from Yoganandaji is just an unbelievably amazing, inspiring book. The Holy Science, to be honest, it blew my mind, and I really didn't understand much of it at all. I think it's something that I'm going to have to reread many times to start to put some pieces together. But he had some really, really interesting ideas in there. So, light to me, I'm looking at it from a pretty scientific perspective still, as best I can. That doesn't mean that these other perspectives are not correct. I'm actually inclined, more than most people who consider themselves, let's say, scientific, to believe all of these ideas. Like if Sri Yukteswar, intuited or felt or understood something, I'm very much inclined to believe that that is the truth. So light to me is just energy. It's a form of energy. I, at one point earlier on in my evolution of knowledge, thought that light was sort of the fundamental energy of the universe. I no longer believe that to be exactly true. But for example, something many people may not know is the physics of the atom bomb, for example. It's producing a massive blast that can level an entire city, or even an entire small country, or even maybe with enough power, a whole continent, by basically fizzing, the process of fission, hydrogen, or I should say neutrons. So neutrons that are part of this uranium that they use in the atom bomb, and the neutrons are basically vaporized. So they go from matter, which most of your listeners probably understand the difference between matter and energy. They go from matter to pure energy, and it's a very small amount of mass. The actual amount of mass that's lost in an atomic bomb explosion is a very small amount, but it's enough. When that matter is converted back into energy, it's enough to basically level an entire city. So what that's really means is that all the matter we see, and this is what Einstein famously showed with his E=mc² equation, all matter is just slowed down light effectively. And the distinction is less solid than we think, no pun intended. The distinction is much less solid than we think. It's really, light is energy that's more free flowing. Matter is just energy that's slightly less free flowing. But because of the dualistic and binary nature of our senses and our ability to sense, we perceive the one as 0 and the other as 1, or the one as matter, fully solid, and the other as energy. A good thing is that we are able, especially with scientific advancements, to perceive the shifts in the states of matter. So we are able to see, for example, water as an example. It's not exactly, yes, you have water when it's, you have solid, it's frozen ice, it's liquid, and then it's gas. So we can see that it isn't all just one, matter isn't just all solid. And water obviously is the one within the conditions of our earth and this planet and this time and this environment that is kind of freely flowing between solid, liquid, and gas. And that can paint a picture of what I'm attempting to express, where it goes from frozen ice that, is rock solid compared to us. And, you can't really put your hand through ice unless you're a really, really experienced yogi, maybe, who can, move through matter. But other than that, you can't. But then when it melts, all of a sudden you can. And then when it, but it's still water. You have to kind of swim. But then when it's water vapor, you could just run right through it. So it's just, the point of me sharing that is that's really the example of water going from solid to liquid to gas is a good example of how all energy and all matter is really, it's not just black and white. It's really, it's graded. So that, the reason I share this is because to me, light is this foundational energy that makes up most everything in the universe. However, going back a step further, when I said that, when I thought light was the foundational energy of everything, it turns out, according to both the Big Bang Theory and Genesis in the Bible, that light wasn't the first thing that was created. According to the Big Bang Theory, starting there, and it mirrors Genesis 1 of the Bible almost identically if you look at it. But the energy that was present expanded in a massive bang and in a very short, like 10 to the negative 34ths of a second, such a small period of time. And there was a period when it was just energy before positive and negative charge became polarized, creating basically light and electromagnetism and everything. And similarly, in the Bible, there was a time in the Old Testament, I should say, when again, some people will be very skeptical of this, but that's okay, that light wasn't the first thing. There was a period before God spoke, and then there was light. And so the parallel there is that the speaking of God, and the Hindu scriptures also share a sort of similar perspective, that there was sort of this cosmic energy that's represented best as vibration before light. So I'm not sure if that quite answers the question, but really light to me is like a foundational energy of the universe, but it's not the most foundational. It's sort of derived from a more foundational vibrational energy and the way it interacts. So that's light to me in an esoteric and scientific sense. Now, we can get then more into how does light affect our physiology, because that's where I'm more comfortable, but I'm glad for you to kind of open up a less usually discussed subject.
Yeah, I think that science and metaphysics are much more clarified if you look at the great scientists. And that's what I liked about the name of that book, The Holy Science. And when Yogananda first landed here, he said the science of religion. And so and there are many philosophers who believe that the emergence of the scientific paradigm that happened was because the original pursuit of truth was along a religious line. And as the church became corrupted in medieval Europe over time and the truth became obfuscated about power and control and manipulation and a variety of other things, there was this foundational quest for truth, which led to the scientific method. So the truth from a religious experimental thought paradigm then emerged into the scientific paradigm, which Nietzsche and Dostoevsky were very concerned about the death of God and the consequences if you don't have this super idealistic overreaching component to say you can descend into nihilism, and predicted the big wars. Nietzsche predicted the big wars that happened. Now, why is all that important? Well, first and foremost, to know truth, you have to recognize it's a relative truth. It's relative on the consciousness of the individual, the observer, the tools of observation. So say, if you don't have a satellite, or if you don't have a telescope, it's hard to see the universe. If you got a telescope, you can't see what a satellite might see. So because a satellite is not subject to the filters of the ozone layer and everything in between that. So even if you have the same scope here on the planet and you have the same viewer outside of our atmosphere, the clarity of the picture, even though the distance is relatively, so what you're seeing billions of miles away or billions of light years away, with only a few miles essentially in difference, well, guess what? The picture is very different because there's all this obfuscation in the filtration. And it's the same thing with our minds, our beliefs, our thoughts, and our quest for truth. And what's interesting about light, as it travels, and we'll go from the sun. Here we have our solar system, and the sun is traveling as a wave. And when it hits our atmosphere, it then starts acting like a particle. So it becomes a tangible essence, that is, which is illustrated in a vibratory spectrum, some of which is in our sensory eye. We can see a certain range of light, but there's a whole bunch of light that we don't see. Other animals may see it, some people don't see it. And so these spectrums of light also have an impact on our physiology, even though that we can't see it. You can't see the wind, but you sure can feel its impact on your life. It will sail about, it'll make you cold, it will cool you off on a hot day, but you can't see it. You see the effect of it. And I believe that the study of light today is about understanding the effect of both the seen and unseen aspects of light. Would you agree with that concept?
Certainly, yes.
So, what are some basic discoveries that you have made about the effects and benefits of light on human health from both the unseen and seen domains that we may be experiencing?
Fantastic. Well, I would love to start on the spiritual side, since we've already touched on that. I was reading a few years back, when I was getting into this, a really interesting textbook about light. It's called Light Shaping Life, Biophotons in Biology and Medicine. So for anyone who's interested in further reading, that's a really great textbook. Again, Light Shaping Life. And it touches on this concept called biophotons, which are photons of light. So the sort of particle form of light, the particle way of observing light, that are actually generated by living cells. So yes, our cells actually generate light. They release.
Someone's
light.
Bright and happy, or they're dark and macabre, and you can see the different changes in the energy of people. Our mitochondria actually produces light, and we resonate and are attracted or repelled by the amount of light in a person.
Exactly. And our eyes actually emit light, and you can see someone has, for example, we have many words in our language, like his eyes were sparkling, he was glowing, many words that fundamentally imply an understanding of this.
That person was reality. Very bright.
Exactly. Very intelligent.
They're
right?
Radiantly beautiful.
Exactly.
Right?
It's
They're
very,
a shining
very
example.
Perfect. Thank you. So it's such a part of our language, and it is actually rooted in reality, in fact, in something that can be measured scientifically in the study of biophotons. Our cells emit light, and when we are healthy, the light our cells emit is more coherent. When we're sick, the light they emit is incoherent. When we are super energized and feeling great, we're beaming light, and when we're sad, like you said, dark and somber, we can be really not emitting a healthy glow of light. The saints and the great masters are portrayed with an aura around their head because it was actually visible to the naked eye because of how.
I've seen that before, radiant. By the way. I've seen holy man. A friend of mine's guru, we were doing, and I want to sorry to interject, but I want to talk about
please tell me
this. So this was actually described to me in physics by Dr. Hart, who runs Biocybernaut in Sedona. He was a physicist before he got into neurofeedback, and he described that when you achieved a certain hemispheric coherence in the brain, it would produce a tau, which is that kind of like the infinity sign over, which generates light, which would indicate the appearance of an aura on someone is actually because of neurological brain coherence between the different hemispheres of the body working in unison, which creates a glowing tau, which is well known in physics from an electromagnetic system, will produce light in a certain pattern and is reflected in these components. I had a friend who had a guru from India, mystic fellow, and I was attending Bharatanatyam dance. Excuse my pronunciation. It's a classical Indian dance. It takes these girls 15, 20 years to be able to perform it. It's very detailed. And his guru was coming to visit, and we were sitting in this auditorium, and him and his guru were coming late, and the hall had darkened for everyone to come in, and then he was coming in, and he literally had a glowing halo as he walked down the aisle past us and sat in the front seat. And I remember going, OMG, that's like a halo of a holy person. And it was so amazing to have actually witnessed that. And so continue on. I just want to do
Can I ask, was everyone, did you know, because I would wonder if it's possible that people of certain levels of attunement, which, you know, it sounds like you've been on the spiritual journey for a while, you were tuned in, so you saw it. Do you think everyone in that auditorium saw it? Or do you think only those who were tuned in enough? Of course, it's a guess, but
I can't say, but I would say this. I think with any degree of intention, experience, and maybe individual capacity, you will pick up things that other people don't see. So for example, if I'm an engineer and walk into a building, I'm going to notice probably engineering brilliance and engineering flaws at a level that other people might not be witnessing.
Absolutely.
An artist will look in and see the artistic design. An electrician will look on it. So whatever your area of expertise and investigation will increase acuity and awareness about things. So I don't know, but it was very obvious to me at the time. And I don't know who else it was. So
yeah, that's very cool. And I see glasses frames everywhere I go. You know, I see nice frames and I see frames I don't like. So it's just every time I see a nice one, I say, ooh, that take a note, you know, right. Maybe we want to start putting our lenses in a frame like that. So that perfect. So that is an effect of light unseen on our biology, seen and unseen in this case, but usually depending on the tone of the interview I'm doing, I'll focus on the external light that's generated by the sun or by artificial light sources. But really, given this amazing discussion already, that's something that I'm becoming much more interested in, the seen and unseen effects of our inner light, biophotons, and how that plays a role in our biology. So, for example, let's say practical benefits and drawbacks. If you have done anything to cultivate your inner light, which could be choosing to be positive, actually meditating, Tai Chi, Qigong, acupuncture, massage, a million things you can do to benefit this system. But from what I've read and am coming to understand, Kriya Yoga, for example, the ancient Indian practice, as well as similar traditions, probably one of the best ways to really work on that inner light field, that the field of energy that makes us up. That's a positive side. A negative side would be if you're constantly drinking alcohol and doing drugs and doing all sorts of negative things, you're really dampening the flow of your body's, let's say, inner light. And there's partially a scientific foundation for this based on this research of biophotons, and then partially it's almost a common sense sort of understanding. I can tie in some more science. There's Dr. Robert O. Becker, you may be familiar with, who wrote The Body Electric. And so this was the
great book.
Exactly. It's an amazing read. And it's for anyone who hasn't read it, who's listening to this, check it out. The Body Electric. He is an amazing researcher from decades ago. During World War II, he was doing his sort of medical training. And he remembers during that time, it was this distinct period before penicillin and after penicillin, and how much that made such a huge impact in people's outcomes as patients and so on in hospitals, especially during wartime, when there were all sorts of infections and all sorts of nasty things going on. And there were lots of amputations going on and all that kind of stuff. The first line of the book, he says, "I remember what it was like before penicillin." It's almost chilling how he describes this amazing journey he went on, and he gets into it. But basically, he started studying how certain animals, why they're able to regenerate entire limbs and humans can't, and mammals can't, as far as we know, at least. And he finds that there's this really, first he had to understand does any animal regenerate? What is the system behind this? And he found this amazing regenerative system based on electricity, specifically semiconduction in our bones, which is shocking because all of the new emerging computer technology was, using semiconduction, but he was doing this research in the 60s and 70s. So it was just as computers were really emerging. And this technology actually is in our bones. And that's how our bones, there's basically a lattice of collagen and apatite crystals doped with copper that basically semiconducts to regenerate. And it's not just that, that's how it's this electrical system that, is how our nerves work and all sorts of amazing things. So he ultimately went on to document this very robust electrical system in the human body and in other animals that is really the foundation of who we are and what we are. And I came to understand, as I had read some work from Ram Dass, and also I was reading The Body Electric, that this soul, this energy body that these great masters speak about is actually very likely the same thing that Becker's uncovering in a limited way, to the extent that the modern technological apparatuses would allow him to. And so, that to me was a really fascinating concept, because it provided, like, to the extent possible with the instrumentation available, Western validation that a lot of the Eastern techniques have a realistic Western scientific foundation. And for me, I'm very optimistic, and I like to try to break through conventional beliefs and learn new things. Because my whole life I accepted, okay, I've got issues, allergies, and headaches. I'm going to have these my whole life, and I'm going to be sick. And that's basically it. I accepted that. And then I learned that's definitively not true. So then from there, it was like, all right, well, what else is total BS that I've accepted? And so I was became on this quest to break through all of that. And Becker's book provided a foundation like none other to understand, okay, all of a sudden, all this other stuff is probably pretty on point. So all that's to say, I've been more recently learning from a guy named Dr. Joe Dispenza, you may be familiar with. He's an amazing, amazing guy. It's funny. The sun's now starting to shine on me. It's like perfect timing. But this guy, Dr. Joe Dispenza, he's a researcher, of course, who's basically helping people to transform their lives. And there's many diseases his, let's say, cohort have been healing just using meditation practices in a very scientific manner. And Dr. Dispenza teaches in a very compelling way similar science to Becker of how our body is an energy field. And he's using the description of the different energy centers in the body, which in the old tradition, of course, they called the chakras, and how we can actually go in and create more coherence and harmony through these energy centers, which sort of make up, and Becker didn't quite get this far in his research, but using it as a foundation, we can look back and say, well, what else did they know back then? And they knew there were 7 primary centers from the bottom, like our perineum, to the crown of our head, that make up the core of different, the guides, like Dr. Dispenza calls them minds. Each is like its own mind. When your sexual energy center is activated, it has its own mind. Really, it can lead people to do all sorts of crazy things. When you're hunger, your digestive system center is activated. We feel that. Same with the heart when it's open and blood's flowing there. And so by actually going in and creating more coherence with intention and just directing our energy there, which is, interestingly enough, a meditation practice in Kriya Yoga. There's the putting attention on the energy centers. It's a Joe Dispenza practice. It's also a Taoist practice, smiling into your heart, smiling into your different parts of the body, smiling into your organs. So clearly there's a foundation. And just through this inner direction of attention and intention, we can actually make ourselves healthier. So starting there, that to me is probably to date the most profound discovery related to light, because it really means that regardless of our external circumstances, we have the power to improve our wellness and health and physiological functioning just with our mind and its ability to direct energy.
What are some of first off, thank you for that. I think that was
of course.
It's so enlightening to see someone who has dove into kind of the esoterics and kind of found a place in life and in business that is able to help people, finding that mission and connecting it to life. That's such an essential component of life and how it's distributed through the body related to health. I want to say, how did some of these discoveries translate into your company, Raw Optics? Which cool name, by the way, and I love the reference to the ancient Egyptian god Ra. So very, very cool. So tell me all about that in general. Like, how did you what got you into light? And then how did that translate into your company, Raw Optics, and what does Raw Optics do and stand for, its mission?
The Bioptimizer mission is to help more of the world fix their digestion at a core level. The truth is, your digestion is only as good as your enzyme levels. Imagine trying to build a house with a tree. It's impossible. You need to chop the tree down into small pieces. Similarly, in order for your food to be used by your body, it must be broken down into a bioavailable form. And that's what enzymes do, converting protein into amino acids, fats into specific fatty acids, and carbohydrates into usable energy units. We start out with an abundance of enzymes, and that's why kids can digest just about anything really quickly. The thing is cooking food kills enzymes, as they cannot survive at temperatures above 118 degrees. So years of this ends up depleting our bodies and leads to weak digestion. Taking digestive enzymes like masszymes, which has an incredibly high level of protease for digesting protein, as well as other critical enzymes like lipase, amylase, and others, is a total game changer. Suddenly, you strengthen your digestion, eliminate gas and bloating, boost metabolism, and multiply your energy. Most importantly, you fix your digestion at a core level. To get started with Masszymes and to save 10% on your first order, go to masszymes.com. That's MASSZYMES.com and use the code MASS10, MASS10.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, what got me into light specifically was when I was doing all these food diets, paleo diets, autoimmune. I mean, I went all the way. I did autoimmune paleo. I did GAPS diet. I did, almost what carnivore today is. And it didn't do it for me. It didn't make me feel it. Actually, I ended up feeling worse looking back, because I was putting so much energy and attention on the fact that I was sick and that I needed to heal, rather than just putting attention and energy and saying, I'm healthy, I'm all good, and really, to the sick or to the profane, that's a concept that can't be accepted. Like, I'm sick. No one can tell me I'm not sick.
Correct.
And that's how I was for a really long time. And I learned at one point, I remember when I would scoff at someone who claimed that they had anxiety, I have anxiety. And I would like, oh, you're giving yourself anxiety, but yet I was the same exact way with my own identification as a person who was sick, who needed to use food diets to heal. And I became obsessed. And I actually created more sickness in that process by identifying and self-diagnosing as a sick person, which just is a demonstration, again, of the power of thought and intention on what it does for our body. I created more stress, and I got into that cycle of, until I get healthy, I can't really live my life. And so I focused all my energy and invested it all into basically being the person who was sick and who had to heal, instead of if I just was more like my friends in high school, just having fun. I probably would have just been healthy if I just let go of that identity that I was sick. Anyway, so I came across some really interesting work, and a really, really interesting neurosurgeon named Dr. Jack Kruse. You may have heard of. Really, really genius guy.
Jack's an anomaly in that, obviously, personality-wise, he's a little rough around the edges, yet his intellectual brilliance and his expose of light and mitochondria and circadian rhythms, I think, is extremely solid. And he does a great service. And part of the training, I have friends who are surgeons, and I think a lot of people like surgeons and air traffic controllers are conditioned to a level of precision and decisiveness that precludes some of the social graces that we come into acceptance from. They have to be right, and they have to know why they're right. And they've got to have a basis of that, and they need to make that decision at where extraordinary levels of risk are involved.
Yeah.
And so it leads to levels of precision and excellence, but it can beset some of the social graces. So if you check out Jack's stuff or his stuff, go in there, but be warned. You want to challenge Jack, you're probably going to get hammered, but go at it anyways.
Yeah.
Cool jacket.
Jack is one of the most intelligent people I've ever come across, truly. And you know, he really had a huge impact on me by sharing these ideas. And, you know, so I came across his work and it just blew my mind. The cool thing, you know, he would always admit it himself, you know, he said, I'm the guy with the flashlight, you know, pointing to all of these different concepts. And I thought that's pretty cool. And I started going and reading the work of for example, he pointed me to Dr. Robert O. Becker, to several other light researchers out there. And I started going and reading their work and saying, man, this is very compelling. I mean, this guy's right. I think he's putting the pieces together in a way that makes a lot of sense. And so I thought that was really cool. That's how I got into light. So then I started learning about how, you know, okay, as we mentioned earlier on, just in the beginning here, morning sunlight exposure sets our body's clock. So, but to be a little more accurate and precise, what's really cool is to consider how that came to be. Like, life evolved 4 billion years on Earth. And we're basically on this rock flying through space, spinning around, as you mentioned in the beginning of the show, you know, in the solar system, which is basically governed by the sun. And so as these sort of, let's say,
we're flying at millions of miles an hour, like a lot of people, while rotating on the Earth, while spinning around a galaxy. As the galaxy shoots off, we're not in the model that like this. We're actually corkscrewing through space at a ridiculous speed.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. It's pretty ridiculous when you think, like, yeah, the Earth's of course rotating around itself, and then also rotating around the sun. But then the sun is corkscrewing, obviously, as part of the galaxy. And then, like you said, the galaxy's flying through space at who knows how fast, you know? So it's pretty interesting. But all that being said, you know, given the precarious predicament, the precarious nature of our existence, you'd think it actually makes sense to at least try to keep track of at least something, like at least one of these crazy, time changes that are occurring, which is this daily cycle. Now, biologically speaking, as we rotate around the Earth's axis each day, or each, 24 hours, that makes one day. And a period of that we're exposed to light, and a period of that we're exposed to darkness. So as an organism, and basically I like to think of life like a sort of ongoing physiochemical reaction and driven by energy. It's very useful, because light is the primary energy source, to know when that energy source is present and when it's not. And that allows us to really calculate what we're doing. So naturally, that is what happened. And this is, so on one hand theory, and one hand what actually happened, it certainly is the case. And so, whether we like it or not, our bodies, every single cell has these clocks, and our body has a master clock. And that master clock is typically called the circadian rhythm, which is circa from Latin meaning approximately, dies meaning day, and rhythm. So the rhythm is approximately one day. Why? Because of course it's following the solar cycle. That's why these cycles they observed in organisms, they said, it's about 24 hours. We wonder why. Oh, it's because the day is 24 hours. Of course, it follows the day. No brainer, right? But that's how it came to be. And it turns out that we have in our eyes these receptors. So we have rods and cones for vision, cones for high definition color vision, rods for low light vision, which is actually the majority of our photoreceptors are rods. And then we have this third type of photoreceptor that was magic, like in a when I say magically, I mean it was a very shocking discovery for scientists who thought they understood how the eyes work, to discover a third type of photoreceptor called intrinsically photosensitive retinal ganglion cells. It's a bit more of a mouthful than rods and cones. It's like, 5 times more syllables than rods and cones combined. But the retinal ganglion cells, for short, or IPRGCs, the scientists say, we'll just say retinal ganglion cells, they contain a photopigment called melanopsin, which absorbs light, just like the rods contain rhodopsin and the cones contain other pigments. Melanopsin absorbs specifically blue light. it has a peak sensitivity in the blue light range around 479 nanometers approximately. So what that implies, and these retinal ganglion cells, they discovered this third photoreceptor that was really a big astonishment. They're not involved with production of color vision, of image forming processes. They're wired directly through the optical nerve straight into what's called the suprachiasmatic nucleus in the hypothalamus. And the hypothalamus is the brain's brain, and the suprachiasmatic nucleus is the brain's brain. So it's really like the master place, and it's specifically the timekeeping center. So it's a really cool like expose, let's say, of how life is so inextricably intertwined with the changes in our environment, the light and the dark, the day and the night, such that our brain's timekeeper and controller, its main function is to coordinate time of day and just keep everything running, and it makes sense when you think we have a good amount of things going on. I mean, a great example that actually Dr. Cruz made, way back. If you imagine a company like UPS or FedEx or Amazon, they have a central sort of timing system. Of course, they're using world time, but if their systems for deliveries and arrivals and all of these sorts of things and shipments out was in any way off, they would have a lot of logistical problems going on. And you think the human body is actually more complex than Amazon. Significantly more complex than all of Amazon and all of its supply chains and all of its fulfillment centers and every package going to everyone's house. Our body is doing way more than all of that. All the packages in the United States don't compare to how many cells and everything are going on in the body. So it makes sense to have a really good coordination of logistics. And that's what their circadian rhythm does at its essence. So morning sunlight with this discovery, with this melanopsin cells implies is that the blue light that they're sensitive to isn't for vision purposes, for visual purposes. It's the same blue light we see as the color blue. Hence, when you wear these blue light blocking glasses, they actually block the color blue. You can't see it because this blue serves a double purpose, one for vision, but the other purpose, which many would argue, intelligent scientists would argue, actually was the first purpose, the primordial purpose of our eyes. Before we could see images, it was actually timekeeping. And that's why the third eye, they call it the pineal gland, is actually considered the first eye, and rightfully so. So this system is controlled by that blue light, and the blue light in the morning sets our body's circadian rhythm and our timing. And then darkness at night allows our brain to release melatonin. So blue light stimulates the production of serotonin during the morning to wake us up. And it also causes our brain to release all sorts of other neurotransmitters, hormones. It activates our metabolism. It gets our digestive system going. It causes our body to excrete waste from the day before. It regulates our thirst. It regulates our sexual drive, our protein production, our muscle synthesis, the whole thing. All of it's controlled and coordinated by the circadian rhythm. But then that darkness at night allows our brain to naturally chill out and relax and start making melatonin instead of serotonin, where we can relax. And then melatonin goes in and actually it makes us tired. And it also basically, the way it makes us tired is by lowering mitochondrial energy production. So we get tired, our energy production goes down, it slows down our metabolism, and then it repairs our cells. Now, there's a lot of takeaways. So just to kind of to tie up this question in a bow about how did it come to raw optics? Well, as I mentioned earlier on, it's such a complex, amazing system, but in a way it's simple. Morning sunlight we need, and then we need darkness at night. We happen to live in this world today where artificial light is like the lifeblood of how people function when the sun sets. It's something we now take for granted, that over 150 years ago, all they had was candlelight. We use electric lighting, and incandescent lighting was actually pretty good. But incandescent lighting is being banned now because it consumes too much energy for the governments that have these agendas, and they want to get rid of the increase in energy use. And yeah, they believe that light serves one purpose, which is for vision, which couldn't be further from the truth. And so any amount of energy usage outside of the visual spectrum of light. So, as you made a really great point earlier, light has visual and non-visual effects. Anything outside of the visual spectrum is considered a waste of energy, specifically near infrared light, which we feel as heat. But the thing is, near infrared light in the sun is about 40%. Now, later in the afternoon, like the sun is where I am here in Costa Rica, it actually ends up making up more of the spectral distribution. But that means that and our biology evolved with this light. That means that our body needs this near infrared light, and it's physiologically proven that our mitochondria need this to generate energy properly, this near infrared. So when we go ahead and pull out the near infrared from our lights and still have all the blue and all the other stuff, it creates cellular inflammation and chaos where the cells are still being stimulated and the brain is still being stimulated to produce the stress hormones to keep us awake and to carry out the processes of metabolism, but without the fuel and the power to do so, which is the near infrared. So what we need to do is get out in the sun more. To put it really simply, the big takeaways: get out in the sun, especially in the morning, for 10 to 15 minutes to set our body's circadian rhythm. And then either turn off the lights at night, use candles, fire, or red light bulbs, or throw on a pair of raw optics blue blocking glasses to protect your body's circadian rhythm and your natural melatonin production at night. That's really what people can do. And what's really cool and exciting, as I mentioned earlier, raw isn't just about, it's raw optics, but it's really just raw. The optics is going to fade away pretty soon. And raw is really about creating lighting that's going to be the most friendly for humans in the modern world, because there's virtually nothing that does this today. So that's really the direction we're going. And I'm really excited about that, because we're going to be able to help a lot more people with this.
We touched on that at Paul's place, and you had kind of laid out that, and that's one of the reasons I wanted to get you on there. And first and foremost, I think the benefits of using blue light blockers. I was very skeptical early on in my career about that. I was like, come on, man, I'm wearing these bug out glasses.
Yeah.
I had a relationship where I made fun of my partner and I said, you look like a space cadet and stuff. But now the technology is coming. You make very attractive lenses. If people want to check out the offerings at Raw Optics, they're very cool designs over maybe some of the other brands. So thank you for that.
And we have a code for you guys, Bioptimizers, just
Boom.
like the company name. So if anyone wants, you can get a special discount too.
Boom. So talk to me. I know we're running out of time, but talk to me about the type of lighting that you think we need to go to and where that direction is happening for people, why that's important.
Yeah, so there are certain things I can and can't share.
Right, of course. I understand. I don't want to give any
course.
proprietary.
So the thing, really though, I'm not in this just about making money and this and that. Like, yes, we have something we have to do that's really important. To put it really simply, the light has to mimic the sun as much as possible. So that's why I'll tell people, like, before you buy raw optics, go out in the sun more. Like, it's not about raw optics. It's about getting out in the sun. Hence why I named the company Raw Optics, because raw means sun, optics means light. So sunlight, it's actually just a synonym, raw optics, for sunlight. And so specifically, Ra is the Egyptian god of sunlight. And that's the primary of all the gods in ancient Egypt, because it was the most powerful of the forces. I'll take a tangent here that I think you'll appreciate. You mentioned earlier on about how people tried to understand science through religion. They tried to understand religion or the universe through religion. And I remember when I first went to meet one of these really amazing researchers who Dr. Cruz had actually pointed me towards. His name's Dr. Douglas Wallace, and he's the #1 world-leading mitochondrial researcher he's been studying for decades now. And all of his colleagues, when he was starting out in research, were obsessed with the recent discovery, because in the 60s, it was a brand new discovery in 58 when they discovered the structure of DNA. And so everyone was studying DNA and the nuclear genes. But Dr. Wallace had come across the research that the mitochondria also contain their own genome, because they used to be, according to evolutionary, they used to be a bacteria that was merged. And so our complex cells are a symbiosis of two separate organisms. And the way we became so complex, and this is a much longer story, but to keep it brief, the way we became so much more complex than bacteria was because of the thousands and thousands fold energy saving per cell that was allowed when the organisms, these two cells, began to specialize. So just in the same way in a business where you could have one owner operator doing everything and another separate business with owner operator doing everything and another one, you could take the ones who were more inclined towards sales and merge the companies and take those salespeople and put them in just a sales role, and they'd be able to produce way more for themselves and for the overall business. Take the person who's really good at operations and executive functions and put them in charge, and then they're going to be able to do a lot more with that. And that's effectively what life did way back. Each bacteria, for example, had about 1,000 genes, and the genes are where the bulk of the energy of the organism goes, is maintaining and expressing all of these genes. And so when the mitochondria was usurped and brought in by this sort of host cell, it went from about 1,000 genes down to 13. And so that was a huge amount of energy that was now saved. And the cool thing was that instead of keeping all these separate bacteria having all these different sets of genes, you only need 2 copies in the nucleus. So it was like a huge example of business delegation, essentially, keep the brain in the brain and then let the salespeople do their thing. And so this energy savings allowed life to become extremely complex. Now, going back to light, where was I going to go with this? So
the kind of light that we need as humans, say inside, that you're working towards, right? But
yeah.
Relative to the sun, because essentially these mitochondria, if I can ask,
please, yes,
are energy converters that produce the electrons that power up our system. And there's a process called electron covalent transfer. In that process, we convert oxygen, we convert hydrogen, we convert carbohydrates, OH negative ions, all these things, these various sources of food, what we call food, are actually converted into electrons. And I have a step down theory, air, number one, that sort of thing. We don't get enough energy from air. We'll start fractionating aspects of water to build energy. Well, if we don't have enough of that, we do moving through the electromagnetic aspects of the core of the earth, through the core, creates energetic responses. That's why people who exercise a lot tend to have more energy than people who don't exercise. It's movement actually creates energy. And then we get into sunlight, which is, to me, the apex of the dissemination of where we get energy from versus how that energy is converted and optimized by the physiological components of the body that we go in, or we can illustrate in physiological text. And if we're going through the whole spectrum of, we live in a solar system, that light is converted or slows down into denser and denser objects. And biological organisms, which have emerged over billions of years on this planet, probably many others, have evolved with the fusion of different components. These bacteria somehow fused with the human condition, other biological organisms, to create a symbiotic power plant of conversion. In other words, it's like a transforming reactor inside the body. And the quality of light going into the body, or in that circadian rhythm, is going to determine the efficiency of how well that mitochondria. So the factory is on when we need it. It is off when we don't, in a regenerative process, and provides us the source of energy. And as we age, it's largely in part the degeneration of that energy flow in the body. And without that energy, systems start to fail, which are based on genetic and epigenetic and environmental and factors that are influencing it. So what we see of various points of diseases can be pointed back out to an inefficient supply of energy to
exactly
the body. And what we're talking about is the governments of the world are now regulating out essential aspects of the energy production cycle under the guise of environmentalism, which is actually a murderous route of ignorance by not allowing us to be able to understand the full spectrum of light that we need to operate as humans, because we don't live outside like our ancestors did. We're living in aquariums, and we are the fish of our own life. We are looking out of the aquarium into life as opposed to being in life. And now it's taken on another level with this digital world, which we're peering into an inefficient light system that is depleting the natural function of our mitochondria. And I would suggest that it's your mission to kind of reverse that.
It is.
That right? Do I got
Yes,
that right?
that was exceptionally well put. Now, I really appreciate it. And you reminded me where I was going. Now, so this guy, Dr. Wallace, this world leading researcher on mitochondria, he basically discovered, he knew about mitochondria and how they came from another organism and how they had their own genes. So it's exactly as you said. While all of the colleagues of the day were studying and have been studying and spending billions of dollars of taxpayer money in the United States on trying to understand the causes of modern chronic illnesses in the genes, and the only thing you can do when you understand there's a genetic cause of disease is you can only give a drug to treat it because you can't really change the genes. Now, what Dr. Wallace was studying is the mitochondria, the producers of energy, and all his colleagues failed, of course, to find the causes of disease in the genes. Now, every single place they started to look, diabetes, obesity, heart disease, cancer, autoimmune disease, etc., autism in children, every single one of these modern chronic illnesses, you see mitochondrial dysfunction, exactly like you said. There's a dysregulation in the body's ability to produce the energy it requires to carry out these complex functions. So we start degrading as living organisms. And what's really interesting is that these mitochondria, they require that near infrared light that's now being legally regulated out of our light sources. I mean, and I'm getting into the research now how to develop these lights, and they make it very difficult. They don't make it easy. They make it extremely impossible, really, to get this near infrared light into light bulbs without kind of being out of compliance. So that's an issue. The one thing I want to say that this Dr. Wallace told me when I went and actually met him, so he's been honored with many large, very high level prizes like the Franklin Award and so on for his findings because they're truly groundbreaking. Sadly, they're still looking at how can we use drugs to treat the mitochondria rather than looking at the environment. But it's a step in the right direction because it takes the emphasis away from the genes to something that's affected by our environment. Now, he told me, and this is really cool to sit down with this guy. You can see that sparkle in his eye, like he's a visionary. He's like a Ben Franklin, and he says, humans for a long time have always tried to understand the universe. And the first way that it was done was by personifying the forces of nature as gods and actually trying to barter with the forces of nature as gods. Yeah. Exactly. To try to get to some kind of understanding. And for me, this very foundational, fundamental idea he shared with me, it was very groundbreaking. It's stayed with me the last 5 years since I sat down and met with him as basically a senior in high school when I was just super curious about all this stuff. And it's led me to really see, like, where scientists say that they've made some great achievement by getting people away from God, I don't really feel that there's been much progress because we really just went from one thing to the next. And, religion.
The quote, science has become the new God, and science has now been hijacked by politics. Exactly. And politics is now the dark lord of the original scientific pursuit of truth, which was based on the foundational Judeo-Christian values of the Western world. And the collapse of that was predicted by Nietzsche and leads into nihilism. And of course, now scientism and politicism and these isms that have emerged as frameworks of organizing an increasingly complex world. But that doesn't provide any internal relief of anxiety. It only increases it. And now people are supplicating, just like they used to maybe burn sacrifices in ancient times to the gods to gain favor. Well, now we're burning our human rights and our ability to determine our lives to the false gods of science and politics.
Exactly.
And, right. So these are the new dark lords of the human existence because we've emerged away from the divinity within our own self. And the divinity within our own self is the fact that we actually are solar systems within ourselves being produced. Would that be accurate?
Amen. Yeah, amen. I'm very grateful to have this conversation with someone like you who knows these things and is tuned into this.
I don't know anything. Important. I just have ideas.
I really appreciate it. I'd say a thing or two. I'd say more than a thing or two. But this idea, it particularly it bothers me when people say, I don't believe in God, I believe in religion. Well, wait a minute, I'm sorry, I don't believe in God, I believe in science. well, wait a minute. Science says that the whole universe began in an instant, and everything came from nothing, and it was a big bang, and then light appeared. And the beginning of the Bible says, in the beginning, the God created the heavens and the earth was without
was
form.
The word, and
yeah.
Nothing was made by the word or not by the word, which is ubiquitous through virtually all of the traditional religions.
Mm-hmm.
That vibratory thing that you talked about earlier, we're coming full circle now.
Yeah, and God said, "Let there be light," and then there was light, and everything appeared from everything in an instant. I mean, there's a great book for people who want to understand the nuance of this more, called The Cosmo Sapiens, where this scientist, but more of a historian, breaks down. And it's not the Sapiens book that most people are familiar with, but Cosmo Sapiens, and it's not just a focus on the evolution of humankind; it's a focus on the evolution of all human knowledge, and analyzing from the creation of the universe to the formation of matter to the formation of a planet that could inhabit life, to life, the formation of life on Earth. And in the realm of, for example, religion, mysticism, the Big Bang Theory, this sort of analysis he makes is that the Big Bang Theory and all these other theories, scientific theories about how life began, are not within the realm of science because they're not falsifiable. For something to be scientific, you have to be able to falsify it. And you can't falsify the Big Bang Theory and all these computer models they make. So people are ultimately worshiping another form of a God, except without morals, without anything. I would rather worship or follow at least some kind of, personally, my own experience, a God or some sort of being that people for thousands of years have come to attempt to understand and learned a way to operate with that leads to favorable outcomes for life. And that's what I've actually come to believe things like the Bible and other spiritual texts ultimately direct us. But anyway, that's a tangent about, spiritual stuff and from this mitochondrial researcher that fascinates me.
In order to observe oneself, one needs an aspirational archetype superior to one's current level to inspire introspection as well as the reformation of actions that someone is taking in life in the pursuit of what would be a noble life. And there needs to be a recognition of its value, because without those things, nothing becomes anything, which seeks into the nihilistic aspect, which essentially is described as the Luciferian temptation, that there is no karma, nothing has any value, your existence is immaterial, and why care? And the height of depression is usually some dark spiral and in my own journeys in life, I have been fortunate and blessed to have touched some of the higher realms forever briefly, which seem like eternity, but I've also dove deep into the dark sides of the human psyche. And I can say, I would encourage all people to avoid that direction and purpose in life of nihilistic. I'm way over time. Tell our listeners, we'll get you back. We're going to have another conversation. You can tell us.
Oh yeah, sure.
But tell us where people can find more about Raw Optics. Check out these amazing lenses and follow, because you've got some great stuff on your website. There's a really great video explaining what makes Raw Optics so cool, as well as some of the other things that you're doing in the world. So
I really appreciate it. So people, if they want to find me specifically, they can go to Instagram and The Light Diet. So The Light Diet is a simple protocol that I've put together that anyone can use to improve their health using light. I have a light diet course that's available on rawoptics.com. If you just Google search the light diet course, you can purchase that and just go through it. It's just some videos and a PDF guide. And I'll be doing more with that over time to simplify it. Rawoptics.com, RAoptics.com is where people can go to actually find the glasses and eventually future developments over time. And I recommend people subscribe to our email list there. There'll be a pop-up, put in your email, and we'll be able to send you updates, send you a discount code if you want to try the product, or you can use Bioptimizers as well for 15% off. That's just Bioptimizers. And that's where people can go if they want to learn more. Stay tuned and follow, and we'll definitely do another show sometime down the road.
You bet. Thank you so much for joining us, Matt. Really appreciate you coming on the podcast. I wish we had more time today. My team is waving at me to get back to my regular programming, but we'll have you back again and dive a little bit deeper. And I wish you the best of success. And for everyone watching, follow Matt. I mean, he's obviously on a great trajectory right now at an early age. And I do believe that his career will be a luminous one, which
thank you so much, Wade.
Help you. So thanks, Matt, for joining us.
I really appreciate it. Thanks for having me. I appreciate the opportunity.
All right, everybody. Hope you enjoyed this podcast. Another edition of the Awesome Health Podcast. Share it with your friends. Make your comments, both good and bad. Did you like it? Did you hate it? Are you indifferent to it? It all counts because you count. And we're wishing you the best of health and vitality as you move towards your ultimate potential. Thank you so much for joining us today, and we'll see you on the next episode.
And now for a Bioptimizers fixed digestion tip: how to get away with eating sugar. Hey, look, sugar is normally one of the worst things for you. But let's be honest. I mean, we all cheat from time to time. And here's a little trick that will ensure your body benefits from the sugar. Now, before you eat or drink anything sweet, take 5 to 8 capsules of P3OM. The patented strain in the formula devours sugar so fast it literally doubles in the body every 20 minutes in the presence of sugar. That doesn't mean that you can or you should eat a bunch of sugar or sit around all day doing that. But on the days that you do cheat, or you go after one of those maybe meals that you wouldn't normally do, this ensures that you get something in your gut that eats the sugar. And it's not going to feed the bad guys or spike your blood glucose nearly as much. So to learn more about P3OM and its sugar-devouring and protein-digesting properties and how it can transform your gut and metabolism, go to www.bioptimizers.com.
Thank you for listening to the Bioptimizers Awesome Health Podcast. You can find more information at bioptimizers.com.